My name is Marjorie Kellan. I'm 78 years old, and I've spent most of my life believing that blood was thicker than water. That no matter how hard the years got, family would be the net to catch you when you fell. That belief died the day I opened the envelope. It was late afternoon, and the winter sun was casting long shadows across my kitchen floor. I'd just come home from another round of doctor's visits, tests for the shortness of breath that had been creeping up on me for months. My hands still smelled faintly of the antiseptic soap from the clinic. The envelope was sitting right there on my kitchen table, no return address. I tore it open, thinking maybe it was from my son, Daniel. We hadn't spoken in a few weeks, but I figured he'd finally decided to check in. Inside was a single piece of paper. Printout. At first, I thought it was some kind of travel brochure. There was a smiling stock photo of a building with beige siding, big glass windows, and a row of rocking chairs lined up on a porch. But then I saw the words in bold at the top. One-way bus ticket. Below it, the destination. Sunny Acres Retirement and Care Facility. The departure date. 3 days from now. And beneath that, a short typed message. It's for the best. You'll be taken care of there. No signature. I didn't need one. I sat down hard in the nearest chair, the paper trembling in my hands. My son hadn't called. He hadn't asked. He just decided. I read it over and over, trying to make sense of the fact that this was the same boy I'd once given my last dime to. The same boy I'd kept fed through nights when I wasn't sure I'd eat myself. The same boy I'd bailed out of more trouble than I cared to remember. And now, when I was sick and scared, he was sending me away like unwanted mail. My breath came short, not from the illness this time, but from something sharper, something colder. I looked out the kitchen window toward the dying light. The trees were bare, the sky a pale silver, and I realized that if I didn't make a choice right now, my life was going to be boxed up and shipped away without me having a say. I folded the ticket. I set it back in the envelope, and I stood up, because if Daniel thought this was the end of my story, he had no idea who his mother really was. And before this was over, he was going to find out. If this story already has you hooked, don't forget to like this video, leave a comment with your thoughts and subscribe to the channel. When people talk about giving someone your last dime, they mean it as a figure of speech. But I can tell you exactly what it feels like. How cold a coin can be when you press it into someone's palm knowing it means you'll go without. I remember it as clear as yesterday. Daniel was 17. His old pickup had broken down halfway between here and Knoxville, and he called me from a payphone in the rain. Said he needed money for the tow truck or they'd haul the truck off for scrap. I didn't hesitate. I went to the coffee tin I kept on top of the fridge, my just-in-case money, and counted out every coin, every crumpled dollar bill. I mailed it Western Union the same day. I was working at the time as a cashier at the Piggly Wiggly, taking on extra shifts at night to clean offices downtown. My hands would ache from ringing up groceries all day and scrubbing floors all evening, but when Daniel came home, leaning against that truck with a shy grin, I didn't think about the hours or the blisters. I just thought, he's safe. He's mine. You see, Daniel wasn't just my son. He was my reason. His father, Curtis, left when Daniel was only 4. One morning there was a note on the kitchen table and a trail of cigarette ashes by the back door. No goodbye, no explanation. Just gone. From that day on, it was just me and Daniel. I worked like a mule to keep him in shoes that fit and jeans without holes in the knees. I skipped meals so he could have seconds. I put off buying myself a winter coat 1 year so he could have a decent one for school. I didn't resent it. Not then. That's just what mothers do. When he was in middle school, he wanted to join the baseball team. The fees for uniforms and travel were more than I had to spare, but I found a way. I baked pies for the church fundraiser, took in laundry from a neighbor, and sold my wedding china, the one thing Curtis left behind. The night Daniel hit his first home run, he looked for me in the stands, and when our eyes met, I swear my heart grew 2 sizes. College was a dream neither of us thought possible, but Daniel had the grades, and I refused to let money be the reason he didn't go. I took out a small loan and worked every extra shift I could find. I even cleaned motel rooms on Sundays, when I should have been resting, just to cover what the scholarships didn't. I remember the day I drove him to his dorm. We loaded up the back of the old pickup with boxes and a mini fridge I'd bought secondhand. As we carried the last load up the stairs, he turned to me and said, "One day, Mom, I'm going to take care of you. You'll never have to work another day." That promise stuck in my heart like a gold pin, something shiny I could always touch in my mind when things got hard. And for a while I believed it. When he graduated, I bought him his first suit for job interviews. When he landed a position in real estate, I let him stay at the house rent-free until he got on his feet. Even when he married Lindsay, a woman with champagne tastes and a diamond the size of a grape, I welcomed her like my own. I paid for part of their wedding, quietly covering expenses when they forgot to budget. I gave them my car when Lindsay said hers was too unreliable for commuting. And when they bought their first home, I dipped into my savings to help with a down payment. I thought these were investments in our future, a shared future where my sacrifices would be remembered, where Daniel's promise would be kept. But the cracks started showing long before that envelope landed on my table. The first sign came 3 years ago when I had a bad bout of the flu. I called Daniel, asking if he could stop by with some soup and maybe help shovel the driveway. "Mom," he said, sighing, "I've got a showing tomorrow. I can't just drop everything." I ended up calling the neighbor's teenage son, who showed up with a snow shovel and a can of chicken noodle from his mother. The second sign was subtler. My birthday came and went without a call. I got a Facebook message from Lindsay, 3 words. "Happy birthday, Marjorie." But nothing from Daniel. When I finally asked him about it, he said, "Oh, I thought Lindsay handled it." By then, my health had started to falter. My eyesight wasn't as sharp, my knees ached in the cold, and a deep, nagging cough began to keep me up at night. The doctor suggested more tests, but I put them off. Money was tighter now. My retirement savings had gone toward helping Daniel after one of his real estate deals went bad. He told me it was just a short-term loan. He never paid it back. I didn't say anything. I told myself he was under stress, that things would get better. That's what mothers do. We make excuses for our children, even when they're grown men with their own families. But then came the night that planted the seed for what he'd do later. It was Thanksgiving and the house was full. Daniel, Lindsay, their kids, and Lindsay's sister and her family. I was at the sink washing dishes when I heard Daniel in the living room, talking low but not low enough. "She can't keep up the house much longer," he said. "It's too much for her. And with her health." Lindsay murmured something I couldn't hear and he replied, I know, but it's going to fall on us eventually. Better to make decisions now before it's a bigger mess." Chill went through me. He was talking about my life like it was a piece of property to be managed. I dried my hands and walked back into the kitchen before they could see my face. I didn't say a word that night, but something shifted in me. And then, months later, when my breathing grew worse and I finally went in for tests, the call came, not from my doctor but from Daniel. He didn't ask about the results. He didn't ask how I was feeling. He said, "Mom, I've been looking into some places for you. Just, so you can have help close by." That was when I knew. The boy who once called me his reason was now looking for ways to send me away. And not long after, that envelope arrived with its one-way ticket. What Daniel didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that the woman he thought he could sideline was already starting to think differently. I wasn't just going to sit quietly and let him decide my ending. Well, I was going to write my own. I didn't cry over that ticket. Not once. It sat on my kitchen table for 3 days, the envelope neatly propped against the salt and pepper shakers like it was mocking me. Every time I walked past, I'd glance at it, not with sadness, but with a slow-burning resolve. Daniel thought this was the end of the road for me. He thought my illness had made me weak, that my world had shrunk to these 4 walls and a few fading memories. But he'd forgotten one thing: how many years I'd survived on my own before he was even born. I made it through the winter of '78 with no heat in the house but the wood I split myself. I worked 3 jobs while pregnant to keep him fed. I learned to fix a leaky roof, rewire a lamp, and stretch $1 until it begged for mercy. So no, I wasn't going to sit quietly and be dropped off at a care home like an unwanted box at the post office. The first thing I did was call my doctor. I scheduled every test I'd been putting off. If I was going to make big decisions, I needed the truth about my health, not the version Daniel wanted me to believe. The results were a relief and a wake-up call all at once. My breathing trouble was real, but manageable. Some lifestyle changes, medication, and mild physical therapy would help. I wasn't on the edge of the grave like he was painting me to be. That was my first piece of ammunition, facts. The second step was harder. I had to look at my finances, really look at them, and face how much I'd lost over the years helping Daniel. My savings were thin, my checking account thinner. But there was one thing he'd never touched: my small pension from the grocery store where I'd worked for decades. It wasn't much, but it was steady. And then, tucked in the back of my file cabinet under old utility bills, I found something else. Stock certificates from a local manufacturing company I'd bought into back in the early 90s. I'd forgotten about them. The paper was yellowed, the ink faded, but the company was still around. I called the number on the certificate. When the voice on the other end told me what they were worth now, I had to sit down. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough. Enough to change my life if I used it wisely. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and started a list. 1. Sell the house quietly, without Daniel knowing. 2. Find a small, manageable home in a town far enough away that I wouldn't run into him or Lindsay at the grocery store. 3. Put my will in order, removing Daniel entirely. 4. Live my remaining years on my own terms, surrounded by people who saw me, not my burden. The first step was finding out what my house was worth. I didn't trust local real estate agents. They all knew Daniel and would run their mouths. So I called an old friend from church, Helen, whose nephew worked in property management in the next county over. He came by under the guise of fixing my porch rail and gave me a ballpark figure. I nearly laughed. The market had gone up so much in the last 10 years that my little white house was worth more than I'd ever dreamed. It took a month of quiet work. Phone calls made from the library computer, meetings with a lawyer in a neighboring town. But slowly the pieces came together. I signed the listing papers in a real estate office 2 towns over, the kind of place Daniel would never think to look. While the house was on the market, I started sorting through my things. I packed only what I loved: a quilt my mother made, my wedding photo, a stack of old recipe cards written in my handwriting and worn soft from decades of use. Everything else I donated or sold. Each box I taped shut felt like another brick in the wall between me and the life Daniel wanted for me. And the whole time I kept the bus ticket. I carried it in my purse, tucked into a little envelope, not as a reminder of pain, but as a symbol of what I was walking away from. 2 months later the house sold. The closing was quiet, quick, and without a single word to Daniel. My lawyer handled everything. The money went into a new account with my name only. That same week I found it, the little yellow cottage on the edge of a small town called Williford. It had a front porch with white railings, a garden already blooming with lavender and daisies, and a kitchen with a deep farmhouse sink that made me think of my mother. I made an offer the next day. No mortgage, no debt. When I signed those papers, I felt something loosen in my chest, like I'd been holding my breath for years. The final step was the will. My lawyer didn't blink when I told him to remove Daniel completely. The bulk of my estate would go to a local scholarship fund for kids from single-parent homes. The rest would be divided among charities I'd long admired but never been able to support. I didn't do it to punish Daniel. I did it to make sure my life's work went to people who'd value it. By the time I moved into the cottage, the air felt different, lighter. I planted tomatoes in the back garden, joined the local library's book club, and started attending a knitting circle on Thursdays. Weeks went by without a single call from Daniel. I wasn't surprised. I knew he'd find out sooner or later. And then, one bright Saturday morning, he did. I was sitting on my new porch with a mug of coffee when a car pulled up at the curb. Daniel stepped out, sunglasses hiding his eyes. He looked at the cottage, at me, at the potted plants lined up by the steps. "You moved," he said flatly. "I did," I replied. "Why?" I took a slow sip of coffee, savoring the warmth. "Because I wanted to." He stared at me for a long moment, as if trying to piece together the math in his head. The missing house, the money, the will he still thought he was in. "I was going to take care of you," he said finally, almost defensive. I set the mug down. "No, Daniel. You were going to get rid of me." The silence between us was sharp enough to cut. And in that silence I knew. He had no idea that the biggest surprise was still to come. Daniel didn't leave that morning. After I told him plain as day that he wasn't sending me anywhere, he just stood there on my porch with that look he used to get when he was 10 and caught red-handed. Half guilt, half trying to figure out how to spin it so he still got what he wanted. "You've got this all wrong, Mom," he said finally, lowering his sunglasses so I could see his eyes. "That ticket, look, it was just a temporary solution. I thought you'd be more comfortable. I was worried about you." I didn't bother answering right away. I'd learned a long time ago that silence makes some people squirm more than any words could. Sure enough, he shifted from foot to foot, his hands flexing like he was itching to grab hold of something solid. "I mean," he went on, "you're sick, Mom. You shouldn't be living alone. And you didn't tell me your house was falling apart." "My house wasn't falling apart," I interrupted, my voice steady. "And I didn't tell you because you never asked." That stopped him cold. His jaw tightened, but he pasted on that thin smile of his. "Okay, maybe I should have been around more. Can admit that. But I'm here now, and we can figure this out together." Together. That word used to mean something to me when he was little. When together meant eating peanut butter sandwiches by candlelight because the power had been cut off, or walking miles to the bus stop because the truck wouldn't start. Now it just sounded like a lure. "Daniel," I said, leaning forward, "what is it you think we need to figure out?" He blinked. "Well, your finances for one. I mean, you sold the house." "That's right," I cut in. "I sold it. And I used the money to buy this place." "Right. No debt." His eyebrows shot up. "You bought it cash." I smiled, just enough for him to see it. "That's right. No mortgage, no bank, no co-signers." He looked at the cottage again, his gaze sliding over the porch, the flower boxes, the neat little path I'd edged with bricks. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head, the calculations starting. "That's good," he said slowly. "Really good. I'm glad you're safe here. And, since I'm here, maybe I could help out. Keep an eye on things. Make sure you're comfortable. There was the angle. The step back inside. I didn't answer him. Instead, I asked, "How are the kids?" The shift caught him off guard. "They're fine." "Busy." "Lindsay's been." "Well, she's been busy too. But you know how it is." No, I didn't know. I hadn't seen my grandchildren in nearly 2 years. Not because I didn't try, but because every visit was bad timing or too much going on. I'd stopped asking after the last time Lindsay said they were too old to spend Saturdays with me. We talked, or rather he talked, for another 20 minutes. He filled the air with updates I hadn't asked for, little apologies tucked inside bigger justifications, as if rewriting the last few months on the spot. When he left that afternoon, I watched his car disappear down the lane and felt something I hadn't in years. Complete certainty. I'd wondered in those quiet hours after I first got that ticket, if maybe I was overreacting. If maybe I was letting one betrayal overshadow decades of love. But watching him try to talk his way back into my life with the same charm he used to get out of trouble as a teenager, I knew. He wasn't here for me. He was here for what I had left. A week later he came back. This time with flowers. Cheap ones from the grocery store, the kind still wrapped in plastic. He stayed longer. Just more questions. "So, he said casually over coffee. "Have you updated your will since you moved?" There it was. No warm-up this time. Straight to it. "I have," I said, sipping my tea. He leaned forward. "Good. I mean, you've got this place now, and if anything happens, I want to make sure." "You don't need to worry about that," I said, cutting him off again. "It's taken care of." The muscle in his jaw twitched. He masked it with a smile. "Right. That's good. I'm just glad you're thinking ahead." We sat in a silence so thick you could have cut it. He stared into his coffee. I stared at the ticket stub still sitting in a little frame on the mantel, a reminder of how far I'd come in just a few months. When he finally left, I went straight to my desk and opened the top drawer. Inside was my new will, neatly sealed in a folder. My lawyer had drawn it up just the way I wanted. Airtight, clear, impossible to contest. Daniel's name wasn't anywhere on it. I closed the drawer and smiled to myself. Because the next time he brought up planning for the future, I was going to give him the truth. And I was going to do it in a way he'd never forget. It happened on a Saturday morning in late September. The air had that crisp edge that makes you want to wrap yourself in a sweater and drink something hot on the porch. I'd just finished deadheading the marigolds when I saw Daniel's car pull up again. I almost didn't answer the door. But something in me knew this was it, the moment I'd been waiting for. He came in carrying a pie from a bakery in town, smiling like he'd been cast in some Hallmark movie about reconciliation. "Thought I'd bring you something sweet," he said. I thanked him, set the pie on the counter, and waited for the real reason he was there. It didn't take long. He poured himself coffee without asking, still the same old Daniel, and leaned against the counter. "So, Mom, I've been thinking, we should talk about your estate. Just to make sure it's all in order. For peace of mind." I took a slow sip of tea. "It's in order." He smiled, that patient, condescending smile people reserve for small children and stubborn seniors. "I just think it'd be smart if I had a copy of the will. That way there's no confusion when, the time comes." I set my cup down and looked him in the eye. "Daniel, if you want a copy of my will, you can read it yourself." He blinked. You have it here." I walked to my desk in the living room, opened the top drawer and took out the folder. My hands didn't shake. Not once. I handed it to him without a word. He flipped it open, his eyes scanning the first page quickly, then slowing, then stopping altogether. I watched the confusion knit his brow, followed by something darker, shock, then disbelief. What is this?" he asked, his voice a little too sharp now. "It's my will," I said evenly. "Drawn up by my lawyer. Witnessed. Legally binding." His eyes darted back to the paper. "But, my name isn't." "No," I said. "Your name isn't." He stared at me like I'd just spoken another language. "You took me out." "I did," I said. "Completely. The house, the savings, the stocks, they're going to the people and causes I choose. Not to someone who sent me a one-way ticket to a care home like I was unwanted furniture." His mouth opened, then shut again. I could see the words piling up in his throat, but nothing came out. For once, Daniel had no script ready. "I gave you my last dime when you needed it," I went on, my voice steady but not cruel. "I paid for your education, your wedding, even your first car. And when I got sick, you didn't offer help. You offered a way to get rid of me. So I took the hint. I started over. And now, you're not in my plans. Not anymore." He let out a short, humorless laugh. "You can't do this." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh, Daniel. I already did." The silence between us was heavy. Outside, the wind rattled the porch chimes, and somewhere down the street a dog barked. He looked down at the paper again, as if hoping the words might rearrange themselves and give him back what he'd lost. They didn't. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. "So that's it. After everything." I stepped forward, placing my hand gently on the folder before closing it. "No, Daniel. After everything, this is what's fair." He left a few minutes later, the pie still sitting on the counter, untouched. I watched his car disappear around the corner, a strange mix of sadness and relief settling in my chest. I didn't win because I cut him out. I won because I reclaimed my life. That night, I sat on my porch under the glow of the string lights I'd hung myself, sipping tea and listening to the crickets. The cottage was mine. My days were mine. My future, whatever it held, was mine. And somewhere, Daniel was staring at a piece of paper that told him exactly what happens when you underestimate a woman who's spent her whole life surviving.